Welcome to Super Simple Security Principles. I'm Nick Jackson, and I want to love computers. They don't love me back. I'm learning how to stay safe online from my good buddy and master guardian, Makani Mason. Woo! He wrote his first computer program at the age of 6, sealing his fate as a computer geek. That's it. He knows his stuff, folks. Now he spends his time teaching people like me and you how to stay ahead of the digital threats we face and those bad guys. He keeps it simple and we love it. Learn along with me each week. I'll ask the questions and make sure he keeps it super relevant and super simple for us. If I can do it, you can do it too. This is episode 68, Security Stacks. 5 questions. All right, here are the questions we'll be answering in today's episode. But as you know, before we get to our questions, I'm going to weigh in a little bit. So today's episodes, we're going to go over the 5 questions we need to ask ourselves as we continue to dive into our series about how to build your security stacks. You're right. Do you like that one, Makani?
I know I introduced it initially because it sounds funny to me, but I realized it might sound slightly confusing. What's a series of series?
Right, the series of series. No, more than anything, this series is about the foundation, about building blocks, and about where we start to build our security. And we talked about the security stacks and their relevance. Today we're going to talk about the 5 questions that we really need to be asking ourselves, continuing on from the 4 P's that we learned in last episode. So we're going to be talking about, here's our questions. You ready? What are the 5 questions in the Bulletproof stack formula? How do they help us? We're going to keep it to those 2 simple questions today. I love it. Again, Makani, what was the 3? Remember the 3D?
Yeah, although I conceded your thing, I think we're just gonna stick with bulletproof stack formula for now at least. So
Okay, good. Woo! I saw that. I noticed the bulletproof stack, you
yeah.
know.
So, but yeah, there are 3, right? Still, I figure if nothing else, it's certainly an easy way to remember it anyway.
Yep.
3, 4, 5, 6. And actually, so am I ready? Am I good to kind of start a
Dude,
little
let's
bit?
let's roll, man.
Because so what I'm going to start out with, this is a perfect introduction because, as you know, I always have Kem review these.
Yeah.
And his primary feedback on this time was, okay, he's liking the words, he's liking the concept, building a good architecture here. And it was all making sense to him as he's reading it. But then, like, he got to the end, he's like, okay, he couldn't quite remember what were the 4, what were the 5, 4 phases from last week, that kind of stuff. And so, and he just kind of gave me that as feedback that he wasn't remembering the whole big picture, right?
Right.
So what I wanted to share with our listeners is just this, like, the idea isn't necessarily that you're remembering all of this. What we're doing is just kind of introducing the concepts gently here, 1 episode at a time for each of the 4, 5, and 6. But then we're going to be doing episodes where we'll be revisiting these over and over with specifics as we build different security stacks. So we'll be coming back to these. We'll also be building, PDFs that you can download, things you can look at online. Like, we will be creating visuals. This is all just kind of, you're just kind of pioneers with us. We're blazing the trail of building this system. So don't stress like remembering or perfecting any of this right now. We're going to be building so much support around this. We're just introducing it verbally on the podcast. You're the first ones to get to it. So, there's not all that support stuff built right now. But for now, just, if just listen, and hopefully it's making sense. If there's questions or whatever, come to the forum and bring those up so we can refine it or whatever. But don't stress trying to remember everything, basically. Yeah.
Dude, that's awesome because do you know what? Just this week, I was having a conversation with a faithful listener. Give her a shout out, Melissa. Thank you. Um, and she was kind of asking me exactly what Kim had kind of talked to you about. She was like, okay, because I was telling her, I was like, wait till you hear some of these. And so she asked, she's like, okay, so if I'm capturing it correctly, the 3D is really only the fact that we're really trying to enhance the picture. We're building this three-dimensional type, or this three-pronged approach is how she said it. And then she went on to say, and then we've got the 4 Ps, right? And I was like, yeah. And we're going to ask ourselves 5 questions about what we need to be aware of when we're building these building blocks and these pillars and these principles. And I said, yeah. I said, yep. And then I teased her again this morning. I sent her a text. I usually do this when I get some little bits of our episode. I'll send her a teaser. Guess what's coming out? And so she was ready for 6. I won't tease our audience yet with 6 because that's for later on in this episode. I'll get to that later. But if that's what our listeners taking, how well are they doing?
Yeah, no, that sounds awesome. I do
Okay.
want to add a one point of clarification though.
Yes, please.
So because we talked, because I noticed you kind of were taught this too. We have the 4P formula, and then we had the 4 layers we talked about, or not 4 layers,
Right.
4 phases, excuse me,
4
last week.
phases, excuse me, phases.
Yeah, no, and that's okay because right, there's 4, and for the 4P formula, we haven't really talked a ton and exactly how it fits into the overall picture too much. We did talk about that a little bit, and that may have been kind of a misstep on my part too. Of we got the 4 phases and the 4P in the same episode, in the same context. It's just naturally going to blend together a bit in your brain, so we may have to refine how we talk about that. Obviously, one thing that'll help a lot is once we actually have visuals. And you
Yeah.
see, here's how the 4P formula. So for now, what I would say is let's try to just completely forget about the 4P formula.
Perfect.
It will come back in, it'll be relevant,
Stay
but for
with the 4
now,
phases then, because that
yeah,
was easier for me, was the 4 phases. And so
yeah,
knowing that I don't have to remember the 4 phases fit into the 4P formula, that
yeah,
it's just, we're forgetting the 4P formula. That's just the 4 phases we talked about. So
exactly.
look, it gets super simple then. We're talking about 3D visualization, the 4 phases, 5 questions you're going to ask, and I'll tell you what number 6 is later on in the episode in case you forgot. We did talk about it earlier in case, but yeah.
Yeah.
Dude, I
Yeah.
love it. So we're caught up to speed then, because that's about
Yeah.
where I'm at.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So for today, um, I want to start off with a little story because we want to understand basically the why of the 5
Mm-hmm.
questions. What's kind of our overall, what's the theme of these 5 questions? What are we trying to do?
Yeah.
And this story. This is from my life. This happened like just in the last few months with me. So I had an ear infection,
Right.
and it seemed like it got better for a while. I saw the doc. I mean, I went to the doctor a number of different times. I thought it was going to be fixed. It wasn't fixed. I mean, this was like months, literally,
Right.
where I was having this problem. And in the end, finally, when it actually got solved, the problem was that I had a fungus infection, not a viral infection, right? And so the meds,
Two
they
different
didn't,
things, right?
totally different things, right? Um, and so anyway, the point of that story and kind of the purpose of the whys is we want to make sure that our security stack is relevant.
Right.
The tools that we're putting into it, the threats are relevant to us. It's a threat I care about, and the layers that we're picking, that you're willing and able to take the steps necessary to defend yourself against those threats. It's all about relevancy. And so hopefully we get, the right medicine, so to speak, like unlike I had for months, you know, for the things, for
Right.
the threats we're defending. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. Because just like kind of your metaphor, if you will, we're all very, very individualistic, right? And it was like you kind of said last episode, in the four phases, like, yes, there are going to be some very common similarities between what's built, right? But the
Yeah.
customization and the prioritization is going to be completely different on individuals and their habits and things like that. And so, yeah, having a doctor treat an individual for their individual needs makes sense. Now, having vitamins and certain health routines is applicable to everybody, right? Or whatever general health purposes are. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, and a part of it too, that there's the customization for at the person level, but then there's also, and I've seen this. I won't distract us with this, but sometimes I look in the world and I look at, we'll just throw this one bit out: airport security or other kinds of, online security is where obviously I know a lot more. But sometimes I look at the solutions that are proposed and the measures that are imposed to try to prevent different kinds of problems, and they seem so misaligned. Like, is that solution, is that measure, is that really going to prevent the problem that you're trying to solve? You know,
Right.
it's like, yeah, I don't know about that. I'm not sure that you thought about something that like sounds good on paper, or if we take it to online security, we just, okay, well, Norton, you don't really know much about the problems. And so we're just going to install this security suite because let's install some security software to solve my problems. But how well does that solution match the problems that you're trying to solve? How does it solve them? What problems are there? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's anytime you're trying to solve a problem, right? If you think about this online security, protecting yourself as in the kind of a problem solution frame, mindset. You've got to
Right.
understand the problem you're trying to solve, so you can actually find a solution that actually solves that problem.
Nice.
So,
Yeah. I like it.
okay,
I like it. I had a few deviants that I really held in,
yeah,
because I wanted to bite my tongue, especially about the security stuff. I'm like, how comes I got to take my, oh, that's a terrible way to say that. Sorry, that was mispronounced. Why or how come I need to take off my shoes sometimes, but when they get way behind or logged back, it's like, just keep your shoes on. We'll get this going quick. You know?
yep.
Like, is this
No,
just
it's
some big
it's a perfect
an acting
example.
commercial? Like everybody walking around either barefoot or in socks, like passing along like foot fungus all over the place. Like it's one big conspiracy to get everybody to spray their feet. You know? I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, I hear you. Yep.
Anyways, so moving on. Can I now
Yeah.
ask the question I've been dying to ask?
Sure.
What are those 5 questions? Uh,
Right. Okay. So the 5 questions, first of all, I have a single word to represent each of the 5 questions, make them a little bit easier to
oh,
remember, encapsulate them into one word. So the five are assets, threats, risks, options, and trade-offs. And of course, like with everything in, do you get the five?
yeah, I got the 5. What does it spell?
Oh, it doesn't spell anything. That would be nice.
Oh, I was trying to figure out
Right.
what words you were using. I was like,
Oh no. No, I mean I know that's a cool mnemonic, and like that I would love, and so maybe we workshop them even so we get one. I don't know, but nope.
we'll work on it.
Yeah, exactly right. These are definitely not set in stone. Something we will definitely be talking about and making sure we have the best choices, and ideally, right, having ways to help remember them or whatever. But for now, this is where we are.
I like it. Okay. This is where we are. If anybody
Yep.
knows of a word that I'm not aware of that can help us out.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, and yeah. So number one is assets. The simple question version of that is, what am I protecting?
Yeah.
And this could be almost anything, but common answers are, your passwords, money, devices, even, people that we love,
Yeah.
ourselves, of course, included. Um, right. It's a pretty simple question to answer. This is the simplest, but it's an important starting point. Because all the other questions kind of build off of it.
Well, you understand what's at stake. You understand what assets you're protecting. You want to protect it, right?
Yeah. Well, and it ties into the overall theme of relevance too,
Yeah.
because sometimes the things, if you're protecting, I mean, there's a lot of overlap, of course, but, protecting your money versus protecting a password, it's not going to be the exact same set of things you're going to want to do. There's going to be some things that you'd use in both cases, but there's going to be different things, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah.
So, as we did before, we want to kind of stick through this episode. We'll be using our home network as our example to help, look at these questions a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, and I don't know. So for the home network, what are the things that you are wanting to protect on your home network, Nick?
Do you know what? For me, I'm looking at the series as a whole, if you will, because we did a home network security. Is this what you're referring to? Did I?
Yeah, the 10
Okay,
episodes.
perfect. Okay, yes, our 10 episodes. So for me, what I really got to the point of what I wanted to protect is I wanted to teach my kids good password management, password skills, and I wanted to protect them from certain things that I was able to filter out from coming in to make sure that they were protected, right? I did see the importance of setting up a guest network for us because I wanted to put certain devices on that guest network specifically as we identified some devices. I called them sleeping devices. Those sleeping devices, like I got lights that are connected to the internet that realistically they could probably be easily hacked if wanted, you know? And so for me, what it boiled down to is the assets I was protecting was my son's online identity. It's what I identified. Specifically, he's older. My sons and daughters, online identity. I wanted to make sure that they understood password management and skills, and I wanted to make sure we blocked some of those incoming calls. Wanted to make sure that we really honed in on what was coming in and going out. And those were the areas that we really wanted to protect ourselves, right? For us.
Yeah.
It was the starters. Again, for me, I don't have your wealth of knowledge, so for me, I have to keep it pretty simple. And so for me, that's where we started.
Yeah. No, that's great. Well, and one thing that happened naturally in your explanation is that, and this happens with these questions, is especially the first like three, the assets, threats, and risks. When you answer them, they tend to bleed together, and which is fine because you talked about keeping your kids safe from kind of one of the way I say it, the ugliness that is so easy to stumble into on the internet, right? So
Right.
that's running, that is implying the threat and even the risk to some degree there.
Right.
And so these first three are kind of a set together just to help make sure we break it down though and get all the details, but it's talking about the problem. And
Gotcha.
so you covered it, and one of the other ones one of the ways I would say that thinking about my network is I want to prevent any of my devices from becoming infected with malware.
Yeah. Yeah. See, you
Right.
eloquently said what I couldn't say about the lights. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, no worries. Yeah. So anyway, so that leads us to number 2, which is threats. And again, the question here is simple: just what are the threats? And what I'm talking about here, common answers would be phishing, malware, hacking, scamming, harassment, spying, Okay. And with this one, there are some good follow-up questions, like sub-questions, whatever. And I break that down. What are the sources, the objectives, and the strategies of each threat? Okay.
Okay.
So again, if we look back to our home network, just to give this a little meat so it's not so abstract we'll talk with the sources. Where does the threats come from? Where do the threats come from, or where does the threat come from? Whatever, you gotta have that matching. Now, oftentimes knowing that like the super specific source doesn't matter, but sometimes it helps. So in the case of the home network attacks, for example, we talked about, there's at least two like sources or groups we discussed. The first is those hackers on the internet, right?
Right.
We don't know exactly who the hackers are, but there's lots of them out there that are trying to get in through our router, right? They make attacks on our router because that's what's visible to them on the internet, and then get in through our router to our other devices. Or if we have other
Yeah.
devices, anyway, so it doesn't matter exactly who they are, but we know there's just hackers on the internet. There's lots and lots of them. That's the main thing to know about that source, is there's so many,
Right.
right? You got something you're thinking? Go ahead.
Uh, I've been listening to some security experts recently,
Uh-huh.
some
Oh yeah.
cybersecurity experts. You know who I've been listening to.
Yep.
And now, is he a white hat hacker in some
Probably.
occasions?
I
That's what
can't
I
remember
thought.
exactly.
I had no idea how many hackers were out there, right? Here I was, maybe a little naive, thinking that there were a handful of good hackers in the world, right? And once I heard him talk, I was like, oh my gosh, there's a plethora, movie quote, of hackers out there. Ton of them.
Yeah.
Like, so understanding that, again, going back to the threats, right? Like understanding, look, this isn't just a handful of hackers out there. This is groups of hackers, or groups of hackers.
Oh
There's
yeah.
individual hackers. Like, there are a ton of threats out there. So yeah, I love this. Keep going. That's where
Yeah.
we're gonna stay.
It's big business. So
Yeah.
yeah. So the second group is, and these are just examples from there, but are the devices of guests that you invite onto your home network, right? That's another
Yeah.
specific source that we identified as a threat,
Right.
right? So then objectives, what do they want? And of course, for our home network, the first objective is just to get into our network any way they can.
Right.
Once they're
Right.
in
And we've
there,
learned in past episodes, sometimes they just sit there quietly.
that's
Right.
exactly right. And that's right. That's part of what we want to talk about, is like the strategy, right? Like what they want to do in there, they want to stay hidden,
Yeah.
right? They want to explore, spread if they can, find good hiding spots, so to speak, caches of treasure,
Mm,
right?
yeah.
And but that hiding, I'm glad you picked up on that, because that is one of the most common, but I feel like under recognized strategy because of its nature, right? Because when they use that strategy as opposed to ransomware, obviously ransomware, as soon as they do that, they're demanding a ransom. But
Right.
when they just stay hidden, I mean, they can be doing that for a long time, you know?
Right.
And
Right.
I mean, there's, yeah, I mean, there's some, in our, that we've seen in our infrastructure, like in the telecommunication systems, that we talked about in one of those episodes, where
Right.
they're still in there. I mean, they're not exactly as hidden now because we know somewhat about it. But even despite that, we haven't been able to boot them,
Right.
apparently. And so, anyway, and who knows what other systems they're hiding in, waiting to, attack at the right moment. And anyway, in the case of home networks, though, bring it back here, one of the ways that they can get value along the way with hiding too is just using the device resources. like we talked
Yeah.
about in episode 60 in the DDoS attacks, where they use our processing power, our internet bandwidth. So anyway, that's part of the strategy aspect. Like, how do they attack us? They hide and these other things. So
Yeah.
anyway, that should give enough meat anyway for number 2, threats.
Okay.
So the last part of kind of the problem half of the questions is risks. So
Okay.
the word is risks, and the question again is just, what are the risks? And well, actually, let me start off with this question for you.
Yeah.
How intuitive to you, like the distinction between risk and threat in this context, Nick?
Completely different, right?
Okay, I don't know. I wasn't sure because anyway, yeah. Share your thoughts.
Let me show you. So I was never good, like never good, but I rode motorcycles and I even raced them, specifically in a sport called motocross. Again, I was never good, so I never made it big. I wasn't pro or anything like that. I just did it more for fun. And in racing, you had to understand, there were some risks, right? And the risks were like, obviously, look, there were some times that I was hitting big jumps, and if I had some engine failures or things like that in the air, it would make landing difficult. It would make some significant challenges. So there were some inherent risks that I was taking that I had to be aware of. And this was whether I was riding alone or whether I was racing. There were certain risks I was going to take. Now, when we raced, there were threats. Now, threats were different. What if I was taking a corner perfect, just like I'd normally taken it, and some other racer decided to take my line and cut me off? Well, now I have a threat. I've just been pushed into a corner. I have no place to go. I'm slammed into something that wasn't always a risk, but because the threat came, yeah. So that's how I
Interesting.
looked at it. Is there
Okay.
certain risks that we take, that we choose to take, and then there are threats to where they're made towards us, like somebody threatens you.
Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah. So, well, that's good exploration. So, because the way I'm using it here, well, I'll tell you, is this. So the risks that I'm talking about here
Yeah.
are not ones that we're voluntary. Like you were kind of using it as, ones that you are more voluntarily participating in, right?
Okay.
And that's the distinction you're making, and that makes sense, valid to me. What I was trying to differentiate here is, so the threats are, these people trying to hack you on the internet,
Right.
the malware trying to spread. And so another possible word actually I consider is impact, because what I'm talking about with this next question is examining what are the bad things that might happen to you as a result of those threats, of the attacks that you might get attacked with, right? So for example,
Okay.
your device might get infected with malware. Someone might steal your password. Someone might steal your money. You might get, a ransom demand. Like, what are the bad things that come from the attacks and the threats? Does that make sense?
Right. That makes
That's
total
the
sense.
that's
Okay.
the kind
Okay.
of flow that I was trying to make with the assets, threats, risks.
Okay.
So,
I love you. I'm going to go with impact because that
okay.
one resonated with me. Because,
Well, yeah, go
yes,
ahead. I'll tell you why I
because,
didn't pick it.
okay, you could tell me why you didn't pick it. I'll tell you
Yeah.
why it resonated with me.
Yeah.
Because when there is that threat and there is that impact, like, absolutely, like, there was an escalation of risk if there was an, impact in racing, you know.
Yeah.
Um, But absolutely, in this case, it made sense to me. Like, oh, okay, well, here's the threat. Now what's next? What happens if that comes to fruition, man? What if that
Yeah.
bites?
Yeah, exactly.
What's the impact gonna be? And to me, that's
Yeah.
completely different than the threat. Like, oh crap, like ransomware. Do I have to pay millions to get my stuff back?
Yeah.
Like, like, so anyways, that's kind of what.
No, and
Now
I'm
tell me
totally
your thoughts. I'm
yeah. Well,
curious to
so
hear your
and actually my first was impact. And the only reason I didn't, and I'm still very much on the fence because I really love the word impact. It's slightly weird to say in the plural, impacts, but whatever. Um, is the probability aspect. So because risk to me kind of combines the two parts
Mm-hmm.
of what the impact is, right, is the first half, but what is the likelihood of that impact happening, right? That's the other aspect. I mean, we could break it out in its own question. We could still just we could still just say what's the likelihood of the impact. We don't necessarily need to. I mean, I get kind of crazy with words, so impact still might be a better, because we could still say what is the impact and how likely is the impact, right? That would be totally fine. Because if a threat is like extremely unlikely to affect me, right, then I'm I'm a lot less likely to prioritize defending against it, right? In general,
Right, right,
right?
right.
But
That
but
makes
that can
sense. Like, I only chuckle because it all clicked when you kind of said that. I was like, okay, I can see. Okay.
right, but right, it's kind of a math equation. At least that's how I think about it being a math nerd. It's almost like multiplication because, right, even if that likelihood is super tiny, like the greater the impact, then I'm back to, okay, well, maybe I will prioritize it because even though it's super unlikely, it's super bad if it does happen, then maybe I'm going to prioritize it. Like it's a balance between those two factors of how bad is it and how likely is it, you know?
Yeah,
Does that make sense? And
yeah,
so that was why I kind of combined it into risks, but I don't know, I still now after talking through it, I think I'm more on the thing. We could still talk about those two aspects easily,
right,
even under the word impact.
right.
So anyway,
Okay,
that's
so
number
we have
three.
that group.
Yep, exactly. Assets, threats, and we'll call it impacts now for now.
Okay,
So yeah. So then the last two kind of go into the solution part of it. Okay, we got
okay,
options and trade-offs. So the first question is options. What are my options for defense?
yeah, okay,
Okay. Or, as we usually talk about these options as layers, right? What are our layers of protection that are available?
yeah,
Now, this is one where, of course, as as a normal person, a non-techie, whatever, non-guardian, you may not know like what all the options are available to you,
right,
right? And so this is where, well, there's a couple things. Like, obviously, this is where one of my jobs comes in to help you know what the good options are, right?
right, right,
But as always, like, I want to give you as much ability as possible to explore this on your own.
right,
Okay. And so where that ties in is the four phases and the six layers that we're going to talk about next episode are the tools that I'm providing to like help you explore that, because then what you can do is you can at least step through each of the four phases, you can walk through each of the six layers, and you can kind of answer this question: do I have a layer of protection, in this area, or do I not? You can at least answer a yes or no about that. Like, do I know of anything that if I
right,
don't, then I can say, well, okay, so I don't have anything, for example, on the home network, how do I detect if a threat has gotten through past my prevention layer?
right. Yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
yeah,
you can
yeah,
just say
yeah.
that, like, okay, so for my home network security stack, do I have anything in the detect phase? Yes or no? Right? Like that at
Right.
least gives you something to work with, right? You may not know
Gotcha.
what the
Yeah.
possible options are. It's not a multiple choice, unfortunately, but you can at least know if it's missing or not. Does that make sense?
Makes total sense. Makes total sense. Yeah, I get what you're saying for sure.
Okay. So, you know, the answer to this question means basically going through all those things and kind of compiling everything together as our master list of protector layers that are available for a given, security stack. So for home networks, we had, the inbound and outbound firewall. We had
Right.
the settings to your router, and understanding phone calls, how those
Right.
work.
Yep.
Um, and those sorts of things. Those are all parts of these are all the options that we have available.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
so then that leads into our final question of trade-offs.
Yeah.
What trade-offs am I willing to make? Meaning, what am I willing to give up to for each specific layer of protection? Which layers of protection are worth it to me? What isn't?
Yeah. Yeah.
Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah.
You
Oh,
got all your
dude.
options you just lined out. Now you got to pick which ones you're willing to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. Dude,
So,
this is
okay, so
awesome.
I would say with your eyes and your body language, I'm thinking that this word's worked for you, because this is another one I debated a lot, of like costs, resources, investments even I thought about. But for me, trade-off, like you might trade your money, but it also might be time or convenience or even a feature, right? Like with home networks, one of the ones we discussed was not enabling a certain feature, like
Right.
remote administration,
Right.
right? Like that's a trade-off. It's kind of a bummer. It'd be nice for
Right.
everybody to have remote administration in a way, but it's also a big security risk. So, each person has to decide what trade-off they're willing to make.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So,
Yeah. Dude, I love these words. These words I think you nailed, you know, option and trade, you know, trade off. Because here's how I see it. I looked at the financial world. That's where my mind went, because
yeah,
there are absolutely what you call stock options, and ton of different options. Like we don't even want to go into how many different options there are, puts, calls,
right.
etc. Like,
Yeah,
anyways, but there's always always a trade-off. Always. There's always handcuffs, right? There's always something that comes with that, right? Maybe you might not make as much because you chose to be protected on the downside. So, okay, while everybody else made more money than you might not have had the loss, but you didn't get to participate in the full gains. And so, absolutely, like these words make total sense to me. Like, and you're absolutely right. Like I get it. Not having that remote admin. I mean, you've helped me multiple times using that remote admin feature. You know,
yeah.
so love it, man. Love it.
Okay, cool.
Dude, we went long. That was a
Yeah,
long one.
you know, so we got to do our call to action stuff
I
finished up
know.
though
That's why
too.
I was saying we still got some things to check off.
Yeah. Well,
So
we had
we got
a
our
lot more
five
stories and
questions.
introduction at the start. So
Right, that's true. And especially understanding this, because these are five questions, but you outlined five questions, but also you had to teach what all these five questions entailed and whys and because and hows, etc. So it was a good episode. I really liked it. So given everything we just took in, all these five questions and how we're going to utilize them, what's
yeah,
going to be our call to action?
yeah. So we've got two more episodes where I'm doing our call to actions is call for helps, and then we'll kind of get back to our normal
Yeah.
call to action where it's going to be something to improve, your security. But for now, we're asking for feedback on anything we talk about. But I always like to give a specific one as well. And for today, really, it's those five words. I'm just curious to see how they strike you, how they resonate with you. Obviously, we talked about maybe swapping out risks for impacts. even though I have a hard time saying it in the plural. But,
Right.
We've got, assets, threats, risks / impacts, options, trade-offs, and they're all plural. So, impact singular could be, anyway, whatever. Are there any words that you'd want to, replace? Or do you like them? I mean, I'd be happy to hear either way, if they're
I
making
mean,
sense. So come to the forum
luckily,
and share your thoughts.
right,
Yeah.
right. And luckily, our listeners got to hear how simple it was. Like they heard me weigh in. So this is a really easy call to action. Like you got to hear me weigh in on what words I liked, what words resonate with you, you know? And, you got to hear the description, like Makani said, these first few episodes as we're formulating our plan. We like to get your input on these ones. So, yeah,
Yep.
good call to action. Great episode. Do I get to tease
Yeah.
them now? Do I get to tell them what's coming up?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So next week, we'll be discussing the third and final part of the Bulletproof Stack formula, which is going to be the 6 layers. So this is going to be awesome because we're finishing up this first section on, again, I'm going to throw it out there because Makani, I love it. This series of series, you know, but we're wrapping up the first series in this series of series. So yeah, tune in to hear how we're going to layer up, okay?
Are you ready to take action and wondering where to start? Get my Bulletproof My Identity Starter Kit for free. The 7 most vital layers of protection everyone needs. I'll send you one step at a time and help you if you get stuck. Just go to bulletproofmyid.com and enter your name and email, and I will send you the first step. Again, that's bulletproofmyid.com.